Good day friends, CEV welcomes you for watching this video on rent assessment. Please do not forget to like, comment and subscribe our Registered Values Club YouTube channel. So in this video, we will discuss about what is standard rent, how it is assessed and what are the conditions under which standard rent is applied. So basically, what is standard rent? So when you know a building or any building is given on rent, then there are two persons involved. One is owner and or landlord, and other one is the tenant. So in case of any dispute between tenant and the landlord, tenant can approach the court for standard rent to be paid instead of the rent which was already up agreed between them. So what is standard rent? Standard rent is a maximum rent which a person can legally recover from his tenant under Rent Control Act. So basically what is done here, it is here investment theory is applied. Let us suppose we have a building. So, on building, there are two things involved. One is land, and other one is building constructed over it. So, what investment theory says that a person who is owner of this building, he will expect certain return from the land and certain return from the building, certain amount of return from the land and certain amount of return from the building, and the total return will be the sum of these two. So generally in case of land, the rate of return is somewhat lower, maybe 8%, 7%, 6 to 8%, and in case of building it is 8 to 10%. But in certain states same rate is applied generally in case of Punjab, as per Rent Control Act, on both land as well as on building, a rate of return of 10% is applied. But in certain states, different rate of returns are applied over land and building. So what we have to do here, how the rent is determined. So first of all, we will calculate the value of the land and then we will calculate the value of the building. Then as per the prevalent rent control act of the state, we will calculate the return which is expected from the land and rent and return from the building which is expected from the building. Then we will add both of them. That will be the total returns. So, but this total return is not only the thing which an investor may require. So when you give some property on rent, you have to pay certain taxes, you have to pay insurance for the building, you have to pay for the maintenance and repair of the building, you have to pay municipal taxes and other things are there. So all these things you have to recover from the tenant. So you have to consider all these things for calculating the standard rent, not only the things for that is built land and building, but the other things which is to be spent by the owner has to be recovered from the tenant. So what we will do, we will calculate the requisite return from the land, requisite return from the building, and then we will calculate the other outgoings which the owner has to spend. Then we taking all these things into consideration, we will calculate the gross rent. So basically it is a gross rent which is to be made made base for calculating the standard rent, not the net rent. So these things you have to keep in mind, that you have to calculate gross rent, not the net rent. So how to fix a standard rent? So when it is agreement emerges about a regular rent, there are two parties involved, the landlord and the tenant. The Rent Act was created to shield tenants from excessive rent, so that is not justified by the law. So tenants can use X provisions if they believe their landlord is charging them much more than the going rate. So, what is the procedure? So, a request for the standard rent is submitted by the tenant to the court. Since the tenant bears the responsibility of demonstrating that agreed upon rent is excessive, his application must be supported by an expert's opinion in the form of an engineer or architect's report. So, what will the tenant do? He will file a case in the court along with a rent assessment done by an engineer or an architect, and then the landlord will submit the reply of this petition with another report, which by an engineer or an architect, so to show that the rent is favorable or reasonable. Then, after weighing the arguments made by the landlord and the tenant, the court issues a ruling that specifies standard rent for the contested party. So, if it is deemed essential in the interest of justice, the case may be taken further to the higher courts. So, see here, whatever you will calculate in the form of net rent, then you will have to calculate gross rent by adding outgoings in the net rent. So how this is done, we will consider certain examples that will make the things clear to you. First, a simple example, work out the rent per annum of the property from the following details. Cost of land is 60 lakh, cost of construction is 2 crore 50 lakh, the required return on the land is 6%, required return on the building is 8%, estimated life of the building is 50 years, rate of interest is 6%, and annual outgoings are 30% of gross rent, scrap value is 10%, and amount of annual repair is 1,50,000. This is given to you. So see here. So first you will have to calculate the return from the land. Cost of land is 60 lakh, and on this you have requisite return of land is 6%. So by these two things you will calculate the return from the land. That will be the first thing. Second thing, you will calculate cost of building. So cost of construction is 2,50,000. Okay. So on cost of 2,50,000, you have to earn a return of 8%. So you will calculate the return from the building by using these two, cost of construction and required rate of return. Now another thing is given to you, that estimated life of the building is 50 years and the rate of interest for sinking fund is 6%, and annual scrap value of the building is 10%. So if that scrap value of the building is 10%, it means how much sinking fund is to be accumulated. So 90% of the construction cost is to be accumulated as sinking fund, means you have to accumulate a sum of 2 lakhs, 2 crore 25 lakh. This is a 90% sinking fund you have to accumulate. So you will calculate the amount of annual sinking fund by using these things: life of the building, scrap value, and the cost of construction. So another thing is given to you as a amount of annual rent. This thing is also be taken into consideration as outgoing. It will be added in the net rent to calculate gross rent. Now see another thing. Annual gross rent is given to you as annual outgoings are given to you as 30% of gross rent. So how it will be taken care, we will discuss in the example. See here, amount required on the land. It is 6% of the land cost. So 6% of 60 lakh is 3 lakh 60 lakh thousand per annum. You will get required return from the land, and amount of return required from the building is 8% of construction cost, means 8% of 2 crore 50 lakh, you require 20 lakh per annum from the building. So how much total you require from the building? Net income you require 3 lakh 60,000 plus 20 lakh, you require 23 lakh 60,000. So first thing is this 23 lakh 60,000. These are the required returns you required from the building as well as from the land. Now we will calculate the sinking fund. So construction cost you know is 2 crore 50 lakh, out of which 10% is solving value, means 25 lakh. So it means you required to accumulate a sum of 2 crore 25 lakh as a sinking fund. So sinking fund rate is given to you as 6%. Life of the building is given to you as 50 years. So annual coefficient, sinking fund coefficient, if you calculate, you know this formula, it is 1 upon s, which is r upon 1 plus r is to power n minus 1, where r is 0.06, n is 50, you calculate, it comes out to be 0.0034. It means you require how much amount you require per annum? 2 crore 25 lakh multiplied by 0.0034 means you required a sum of 76,500 per annum to be deposited as sinking fund. Another thing is given to you that outgoings are 30% of gross and rent. So let us suppose gross rent is X is gross rent per annum, so outgoings will be 30% of gross rent, which is 0.3x. Another thing is given to you is annual repairs, which is 1 lakh 50,000. Now see here, what is net income? Net income will be equals to gross rent minus outgoings. Minus outgoings means seeking fund installment, minus outgoings, minus annual repairs. But actually we need to calculate gross rent and not the rent. So X gross rent is X, 6X, and which we assumed this is sinking fund is 76,500 and outgoings are 0.3x and annual repair is 1 lakh 50,000. So it should be equals to net income, and net income you have calculated as 23 lakh 60,000. So you put all the values, you can calculate the X comes out to be 36 lakh 95,000. It means this is the gross rent which is to be recovered. So this is the annual gross rent basically. So you calculate the rent per month, you divide it with the number of months, that is 12. So gross rent per month is 3 lakh 7,916, say 3 lakh 8,000 per month. So in this way you can calculate the standard rent of a building. So we will take some other examples to make the things clear. A residential flat in a four-story building has a plate area of 150 square meter. The consolidated property tax is assessed at 1800 per quarter of the flat for the flat. In the surrounding areas, similar type of flats with similar size, age, etc. has sold at 17,000 per square meter. Calculate the reasonable monthly rent assuming floor area ratio fully has been fully utilized. Annual maintenance charges are to be done by the owner. The property is not insured. The annual return may be assumed at, sorry, it is 9%, and sinking fund may be assumed at 3.5%, and the life of the building is 60 years. Expected annual return is 10%, and annual maintenance charges are 10% of annual return. This is given to you. Now see here, size of the building, the flat is 150 and rate, see here, it is already with similar size, age, etc. It means this rate is depreciated rate already, because age and size, etc. are already considered here. So it is depreciated rate per square meter. So we will calculate the value of the flat as on today, including depreciation. So it will be size multiplied by rate per unit, which is 17,000 per square meter, it is 25 lakh 55,000. So annual return is assumed 10% of per annum it is given to you. Expected annual return is 10%. So the required return is 2 lakh 55,000. And property tax is add to it per annum, it is 1800 per quarter. For 4 quarters it will be 7200 or 7200. So maintenance and repair charges, it is given as 10% of expected return, means 10% of 2 lakh 55,500 means 25,550. And annual sinking fund you can calculate by using annual sinking fund is 3.5%, age is 60 years, that is 0.1551% of 25 lakh 55,000, it is 13,030. So you add all these required things which is to be collected as a gross rent. So expected annual return, so including all the expenditures you have to take into consideration, will come out to be 3 lakh 1,250. So you divide it with number of months, which is 12. So an expected monthly rent is approximately 25,106, say rupees 25,000. So in this way you can calculate the rent of a flat. So another thing is when you have to assess the rent of multi-story buildings. It may be that residential multi-story building, it may be commercial residential building. So how to take the value of land in this case? So building, you know, there are two parts. One is land and other is building. Then how this land part is considered? That is important. That will come from a term which is called loading factors. So it is clear that in terms of ability to collect rent, multi-story buildings floor do not hold equal significance. For example, from the perspective of light, ventilation, smoke, annoyance, etc., lowest floor of a residential building will be less appealing. Similarly, this in case of shopping center, the lower ground floor level will be more appealing due to improved business opportunities, showroom, etc. So it is when both the case you have to see what type of utilities the building has. If it is a residential building, so lowest floor will be less favorable. But if it is a commercial building, shopping center, then the lowest ground level will be more appealing. So the term loading refers to the coefficient that must be utilized in order to bring the structure's many levels to a common footing so that land value can be appropriately distributed among them. So this loading factor, there is no hard and fast rule, or there is no particular formula which can be used to calculate the loading factor, but generally in case of residential buildings, for residential buildings, the ground floor is loading factor for ground floor is taken as 1, and as we go for first floor it is taken 5% more, 1.05%. For second it is 1.15%. For fourth floor it is 1.20%, means 5% higher for each subsequent floor. But from fourth floor onwards it remains constant as 1.2%, which is generally taken. And for commercial building, you may use this value on the opposite side. For commercial building, it may be for the upper floor it will have lower value, and for the floor and as we go down then this value will be higher. For the ground floor it is generally taken from if the shopping if the ground floor is being used for shops, then the value you for loading you may take it from 1.25 to 3. So we will take these things into consideration how loading is applied in this example. An RCC framed building is let out at rupees 1,04,400 per month in the business locality of city Jalandhar. The ground floor is used as shops and upper floors are used as residential units. Calculate the standard rent for each floor with the following carpet area for each floor. So ground floor it is 1 lakh 150 square meter, first floor is 150 square meter, second floor is again 150 square meter, third is 130 square meter, and fourth floor is 120 square meter. So here we will be applying loading factors, suitable loading factors, and as you know, the ground floor will be having more utility, it will have more higher loading factor. So we will take this example, say for ground floor, we are assuming a loading factor of 3. For ground floor, actual carpet area is 150 and loading factor is 3. So loaded carpet area for ground floor will be considered as 450 square meter. So here, see here, in the case of such type of building, the highest floor will be given a loading factor of 1. And as we go down, the loading factor will be increased by 5%. For second, third, fourth floor, it is 1. For third floor, it is 1.05. For second floor, it is 1.10. And for the first floor, it is 1.15. Of course, for the ground floor, we are being a shopping complex, we are assuming the loading factor as 1. So first loading factor are decided, we will multiply the area of the floor with the loading factor and we will get the loaded carpet area. So for first floor it is 450 square meter, for second floor it is 150 into 1.15, it is 172.5, for second floor it is 1.165, for third floor it is 136, and for the fourth floor it is 120. So total will come out to be 1044. This is a total loaded area 1044 square meter, and rent, monthly rent is given to you as 1 lakh 4400. It means per square meter rent comes out to be 100. So you can calculate the rent for each floor. For the ground floor, it is 450 loaded carpet area. Rate of letting area is 100. So rent for the ground floor is 45,000. Similarly, for the first floor, 175, 2.5 multiplied by 100, it is 117,250. For second floor, 165 into 100, 16,500. For third floor, 136.5 into 100, 13,650. For fourth floor, it is 120 into 100, it is 12,000. So total comes out to be 1,04,400. So in this way, you can do calculation for rent where loading has to be given for different flooring. How it is can be done. This example explains you everything. Then another example suggests the reasonable standard rent for a residential building in a housing society purchased on the ownership basis with the following particulars: cost of land paid to the society rupees 20 lakh, cost of superstructure is 65 lakh, amount spent on additional work rupees 5 lakh, amount to be shared to be purchased for becoming the member of the society rupees 50,000, society services charges rupees 3 years, period of completion 2 years, prevalent rate of interest as 8%, rate of on value of land, return on rate value of land is 8%, return on cost of construction is 9%, repair may be taken as 9% of total cost of structure, insurance may be taken as 0.25% of superstructure, sinking fund at 3.5% for with the life as 80 years on the total cost of construction, municipal taxes and rent collection charges at 30% of gross, and society services charges at 3,000 per month. Interest on capital blocked in the share at 7% on 50,000. So see here, you require a return of 9% on cost of construction. So cost of construction is 65 lakh plus 5 lakh is to be additional for has to be spent. So total cost of construction will be 70 lakh, or which you require a return of 9%, and on cost of land which is 20 lakh, you required a return of 8%. So other things you have to consider: repairs, insurance, sinking fund, municipal taxes, society services charges. And another thing, see here, he has to pay rupees 50,000 for becoming a member of the society. So how to take this thing into consideration? For this, he has given that an interest on the block cost of block at of 50,000. This has to be given a charge of 7 at the rate of 7%. So this for this its value will be calculated at the rate of 7%, and which will be added in the gross rent. So another thing will be that he has deposited the amount and it will take about 2 years for the building to be completed. So 8% rate of interest is given. It means we assume that this interest will be paid for at least 1 year. So this thing we will also take into consideration. So how we will proceed? See here. So total cost of superstructure 65 lakh plus 5 lakh is your additional amount which you have to spend. So it is 70 lakh interest on the ideal capital. So we will assume that for 1 year, if half the construction period at 8%, for 1 year it is 5 lakh 60,000. So total cost of superstructure will come out to be 70 lakh plus 5 lakh 60,000. This is interest. So total will come out to be 75 lakh 60,000, and cost of land is 20 lakhs. So these things are to be considered. So we will calculate the fair standard rent based upon the investment theory. See how it will be done. So return of the land is 20, cost is 20 lakh. So value of the land at cost, return from the land at 8% comes out to be 1 lakh 60,000. Then return on the cost of construction, which is 5 lakh 60,000. So it comes out to be 6 lakh 80,400, 9% of it. And then the repairs may be taken as 1% of cost of infrastructure. So 1% of 68 lakh 4,400, it is 68,040. And then insurance may be taken as 0.25% of cost of superstructure. So it will be, sorry, it is repairs is taken as 10%. No, not 1%, it is 10% of total cost of structure. And insurance is taken as 0.25% of superstructure, which is uh, 18,900. So it is a 2.5% basically. One 10% and 2.5%. And then sinking fund you can calculate at 3.5% for 80 years. Sinking fund coefficient will be 0.24%. So net rent will be 94 9,45,484. So municipal taxes are given to you as 30% of gross rent. So let us suppose gross rent is net x, then it means x minus 30% of gross rent should be equals to net rent, where x is gross rent per annum. So if you calculate all these things, 0.7x is equals to 9 lakh 45 4,484. So it will come out to be 30 lakh 50,691. So rent per month you divide it with 12, it will be 1 lakh 12,557. Another thing is given to you society services charges per month, which is given to you as 3,000. And then interest on capital blocked in the share at 7% of 50,000 or 0.583% per month, which is 291.66 rupees. So total will be 1 lakh 12,557 plus 3,000 plus 291.66. It is 1 lakh 15,848.7. Approximately 1 lakh 60,000 will be the rent per month. So in this way you can calculate the standard rent for various types of buildings. So thank you very much for watching this video. Have a nice day.